You believe you cannot be controlled. That belief is exactly what makes you controllable, not despite your confidence in your independence, because of it. The most manipulated people on earth are not the passive ones, not the easily led, not the ones who follow without questioning. The most manipulated people are the ones who are absolutely certain they think for themselves. Reverse psychology is not a party trick. It is not a parenting tip. It is not a negotiation hack. It is a window into something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives refusing to see. If being told what to do creates resistance in you, ask yourself what happens when someone tells you the opposite. You already know the answer. You just do not want to look at it directly. The resistance you feel right now, that slight defensive tightening, is the thing we need to talk about. Your ego does not hate being controlled because you are free. Your ego hates being controlled because control reminds it of what it is: a mechanism, a predictable, reactive mechanism. And the ego cannot survive that knowledge. When someone gives you a direct command, something inside you pulls back, not because you have evaluated the command and found it lacking, not because your independent judgment has concluded the instruction is wrong. It pulls back because the act of being directed feels like a threat to the story you carry about who you are. The story says you are sovereign. The story says you choose. The story says no one moves you without your consent. That story is doing a tremendous amount of work to protect you from a deeply uncomfortable truth. Watch what people do when they feel pressured. They do not become more rational. They become more oppositional. A parent tells a teenager not to do something. The teenager does it. A government restricts something. The restricted thing becomes desirable. A critic attacks a book. The book sells out. This is not coincidence. This is the machinery of the human ego operating exactly as designed. The desire for autonomy is real. But most people have never examined whether what they call autonomy is actually independent thought, or simply reflexive opposition to whatever came from outside. There is a difference between choosing and reacting. Most people spend their lives reacting and calling it choice. Resistance does not feel like weakness. Resistance feels like strength. It feels like backbone. It feels like refusing to be pushed around. And that feeling is exactly what makes it exploitable. Because the person who experiences their resistance as strength will never question it. They will defend it. They will perform it. They will build a self-image around it. And the moment resistance becomes part of your identity, you are no longer evaluating situations. You are protecting a story. That story can be read. And anything that can be read can be used. Direct pressure creates resistance. That is the law. But here is the implication most people never follow to its conclusion. If resistance is predictable, resistance can be manufactured. And if resistance can be manufactured, the rebel is not free. The rebel is just a puppet being pulled in a different direction. If people resist direct control so predictably, could that resistance itself become a tool for control? People move toward whatever appears forbidden, whatever appears restricted, whatever appears to be slipping out of reach. Tell someone a book is banned. They want to read it. Tell someone they probably cannot handle something. They need to prove they can. Tell someone this is not for people like them, and watch them fight to belong to the category they were told they cannot enter. The mechanism is automatic. It does not wait for rational thought to arrive. The emotion fires first, the decision follows, and the reasoning is constructed afterward to make the whole thing look deliberate. The person using reverse psychology does not need to force you anywhere. They simply need to show you a door and tell you it is locked. You will do the rest yourself. And the entire time, you will feel like you are making a free choice. That feeling of freedom is not incidental. That feeling of freedom is the product. Think about the choices you are most certain about, the ones you have defended, the ones you have argued for. Now ask yourself, how many of them were formed by thinking forward, and how many were formed by pushing back against something? How many of your preferences are actual preferences, and how many are positions you took in opposition to a person, an idea, an authority you decided to reject? You may find it is difficult to separate the two, because for many people, identity and opposition are the same thing. A person whose identity is built on opposition does not evaluate ideas, they sort them. Acceptable or unacceptable, based on origin, not content. Based on who is speaking, not what is being said. The idea arrives, the ego checks the source, and the verdict is delivered before thinking begins. This is not skepticism. This is a vending machine. Put in the right input, get the predictable output. The moment someone can predict your rebellion no longer belongs to you. There are people who have built entire personalities around what they refuse. Entire belief systems assembled not from careful examination, but from the need to resist what someone else was pushing. They do not ask, "Is this true?" They ask, "Who said it?" If the wrong person said it, dismissed. If the right person said it, accepted. The content is almost irrelevant. The source determines the verdict. This is not thinking. This is tribal reactivity wearing the costume of independent thought. And reverse psychology lives exactly here, in the gap between feeling free and being free. The person who needs to prove they cannot be controlled is already controlled. They have simply handed the lever to the idea of control itself. Tell them what to do. They refuse. Imply they cannot do something. They chase it. Suggest it is too difficult for them. They dedicate themselves to proving otherwise. The harder they fight to demonstrate their independence, the more perfectly they confirm the prediction. The rebellion belongs to whoever designed the conditions for it. Entire movements have been built this way, entire consumer markets, entire political identities. The architects do not argue with the rebels. They do not try to convert them. They simply design the walls and let the rebellion run in the direction they intended. The rebel feels alive. The rebel feels righteous. The rebel feels like they are finally pushing back against something real, and they are moving exactly on schedule. The irony is total. The harder someone tries to prove their independence, the more predictable they become. Independence performed for an audience is just a different kind of obedience. What if the strongest form of control requires no force at all? Most people imagine manipulation as pressure, force, commands, threats, something you can feel and identify and resist. The uncomfortable reality is that the most effective influence feels like nothing. It feels like your own thought arriving naturally. It feels like a conclusion you reached yourself. It feels like a decision made in complete freedom. That is not a description of manipulation failing. That is a description of manipulation succeeding completely. The target does not feel controlled. The target feels autonomous. The target feels like they are finally doing what they actually want. That is precisely why it works. You are not only vulnerable to this from individuals, you are vulnerable to it from systems, from entire architectures of information designed to produce the feeling of independent conclusion while delivering a pre-engineered result. You encounter a narrative you were not supposed to accept. You reject it. You feel satisfied. Good, you are thinking critically. But the rejection was anticipated. The content was designed to be rejected. Because what it was actually doing was pushing you toward a different belief, the one that forms when you push back. You have been used by your own resistance. The most sophisticated forms of influence do not target your agreement. They target your opposition. They understand that getting you to disagree with one thing will reliably produce agreement with another. Reverse psychology is not powerful because it changes people. It is powerful because it reveals people. It exposes the predictable machinery running beneath the performance of individuality. And this is the layer most people never reach, because reaching it requires something almost no one is willing to do. It requires sitting with the possibility that the choices you are most proud of, the ones that felt most like you, may have been the most engineered, not by a villain, not by a conspiracy, simply by someone who understood human nature well enough to let it run its own course. They did not push you. They simply knew where you were going before you did. And they put something there. Most people will encounter this idea and immediately locate it in someone else. That person in their life who is clearly reactive. That group that obviously moves in predictable patterns. That type of person who always falls for this kind of thing. That reflex, the reflex to locate the pattern anywhere but inward, is the thing we have been describing the entire time. The need to find this in others rather than sit with the possibility that it lives in you is not discernment. It is the ego protecting its story about itself. A person who truly cannot be controlled does not need to insist on it, does not need to demonstrate it, does not need to resist on principle. They simply think, slowly, without the urgent need to prove anything to anyone, including themselves. That kind of person is genuinely difficult to predict. That kind of person exists. But they are never the person who is certain they are that kind of person. The ones who are certain are always the easiest to move. Most people believe they are difficult to control. That belief is not evidence of freedom. It is the mechanism of the trap. Reverse psychology works not because people are stupid. It works because people are human, because somewhere beneath every rational argument and every confident self-image is an ego that cannot tolerate being told what it is. And the person who understands that about you does not need to force you anywhere. They only need to wait and watch you become exactly who they expected.